Welcome to Closing the Growth Gap. I'm Ben Scanlon, co-founder of Mosaic Growth Solutions, and Closing the Growth Gap is where we share our insights. That's right, our insights. Neeti Patel, my fellow co-founder, is joining me today, and will do so on a regular basis on Closing the Growth Gap. And we will share our insights on the most interesting topics in growth and marketing. But today, what we're covering is what is fast growth and what are 4 challenges companies experience post-investment that keep them from achieving fast growth. So stay tuned and we'll get started. Neeti, how are you today?
I am good. How are you?
I'm terrific. I'm really excited to be talking to you because we're talking about my favorite subject, well, one of my favorite subjects, which is growth, much to the annoyance of my friends and family. So I'm glad that you are my partner in crime in this. And today we're talking about what growth can look like and some of the barriers to growth. So Neeti, maybe to get started, maybe you could just talk about, what sort of companies are we talking about, just to lay the context in terms of, the questions I ask you moving forward.
Yeah, so our clients are mostly mid-stage technology companies, software companies that receive equity funding and are on the brink of transformational growth, meaning they're expected to grow 3 times, 5 times over a course of 3 to 5 years. And so this is very fast growth. It's very scalable growth, and it's very impressive growth that they are trying to achieve.
And so, it sounds like everyone would be interested in achieving fast growth. Is there, what does that look like? How would you define fast growth?
I think fast in this case means most efficient path to growth. So we're not talking about hacks here. We're not talking about making the numbers look good in the short term, but fast meaning it is the most straightforward way to get from where you are today to where you need to be. And the reason why identifying the fastest path to growth is so critical for these organizations that we work with is because there are a lot of different ways they can grow. They're successful companies that have demonstrated strong growth, when we start working with them, and the path forward could take many different flavors, right? Like you can invest in product, you can launch a new go-to-market motion, you can try to sell more to your existing customers, you can acquire a new company. The possibilities are endless. And so really thinking about your organization, or, in our case, our client's organization, where their strengths are, what the competition is doing, and figuring out what the smartest, fastest path to growth is really important, and making sure that everyone is kind of focused on whatever path you've identified. It's really easy to get distracted and start going down different paths.
Right. And that's a great lead in. So, like I said, I think everyone, I definitely appreciate the idea of fast growth. I think all companies would, want to be able to achieve this fast growth. What do you see as some of the barriers to that? Like, why aren't they able to achieve that?
I think the number one thing that we often see is the lack of a growth vision. And what I mean by a growth vision is, how is this company going to get from where it is today to where it needs to be? What are the specific actions they're going to take? What needs to hold true both internally and macro, in the macro environment, for them to be successful? And really be able to clearly articulate that to not only the leadership team, but the whole organization. I think a lot of times leadership gets hesitant to put their eggs in a couple baskets and want to kind of keep all options open, because it is a very volatile environment and there is uncertainty and things change very quickly. But I think when you try to do all the things, you don't do anything really well. And so I think the first challenge that we often see, and the first probably best place you can start in order to achieve fast growth, is to have a growth vision.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I thought you posted an interesting article yesterday, or shared an interesting article that kind of, it was saying like CEOs don't have faith in their teams to be able to, execute on their growth. But it sounds like it probably, defining this growth vision comes from the CEO. It's not something that the marketing team or the go-to-market team is necessarily developing.
Yeah, 100%. I always say, like, you can have the best strategy and you can have the best leadership, but if your organization is not aligned on where it needs to go and how it's going to get there, you're not going to see progress. In fact, you'll probably see a lot of frustration and a lot of resources being wasted on things that aren't going to move the needle.
Right. And I think that's the power of the growth vision, right? Is that it helps correct that mindset that like, this is all you need to do for growth. Like it will help set the what you need to, the direction you need to head and get alignment around that idea.
Yeah. I think there's 3 more barriers. So bear with me here.
Okay.
The second one is a lack of good reporting. So in order to demonstrate growth, you have to be able to measure growth. And in order to measure growth, you have to have the right operational infrastructure in place. And a lot of the companies we work with are founder-led. They are bootstrapped until they receive this investment. So they really haven't had a need to report results consistently to anybody, which obviously is now going to change. They're getting money. They need to let their investors know what's happening with that money and how it's being used to drive growth. And so a lot of organizations get very excited and dive right into the tactics. And then, 6 months from the start, they realize, well, we have no way of knowing what's actually working and what's not working. And that's a problem. And so really figuring out what are your KPIs? Where is the data coming from? How are you going to make sure it's reliable and trustworthy? Do you have the correct attribution throughout the funnel and the right visibility to be able to create meaningful performance reporting that will allow you to, again, manage what you measure?
Right, absolutely.
So that's the second thing. And then the third thing I think is the culture that you build within the organization. Like you can't expect everyone at all levels of the organization to have the same level of excitement and belief in the growth vision as your leadership does. And so really taking the time to make sure that you bring the rest of the organization along on this journey is really important. And build the excitement and build the vision around here's where we're going, and we are all going to be an integral part of getting there. And so I think a lot of times, again, the need to show progress and the desire to get started on tactics right away, sometimes leaders lose sight of how important it is to just make sure the organization itself feels ready and capable and supported in the journey that you're about to take. So those are 3 of the big barriers. And then, just making sure that everyone is comfortable taking risks and making mistakes and moving quickly is, again, really important part of building an organization that is ready to achieve fast growth.
And a lot of these, I wouldn't say that's like rocket science. And so it's kind of interesting, like why do you think that some of these fundamental issues have not been addressed?
I just think there's so much pressure to show progress almost immediately. Like that first board meeting comes really quickly, right? Like your first month in, you're presenting to a board about what you've done in the last month. And there's just such pressure to show progress and show impact that a lot of times some of these fundamental things that will enable long-term scalable growth are just skipped over because they take time, they're not interesting, they're not directly driving any sort of results, but they're so critical. And we've seen time and time again, if you don't address them up front, it will take much more time and it'll break much more valuable momentum addressing it 6 months from now or even a year from now. So I think that's what it is. I think it's like, how do you appease the stakeholders who want to see progress, they're excited about the future, with doing things the right way, which sometimes takes some time up front.
And do you think like the investors, it sounds like the investors should probably be aware that these are things that need to be addressed. Like they need to, account for this, because we have seen it's like such a fundamental thing in terms of being able to drive growth. And so, it's not just like a checklist for driving growth. Like, these things need to be addressed. So it sounds like some sort of communication needs to happen between the CEO and founder and the investors to make sure that that time is allocated to be able to accomplish these things.
Absolutely. I think that transparency and just having very candid conversations around where some of these challenges exist in in achieving growth is really, really important. However, I will also say that you go to a board meeting, for the second month, third month, fourth month in a row and not have anything tangible to show in terms of growth and progress towards growth is also not very is not acceptable. And so you have to also figure out a way in parallel to building these foundational elements and addressing some of these, I like to call them like silent obstacles. Right. You have to be able to deliver the quick wins and show that you have a plan. I think, again, it comes down to being able to communicate, here's the vision, here's where we are, here is where we're going. And just ensure that everyone's kind of aligned on priorities.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that's an area where we've evolved. Like, I think we were great in terms of assessing the opportunities for quick wins, which, were beneficial for the organization and showed tangible results. But I think our evolution was saying, like, look, we accomplish these quick wins. How do these companies achieve growth beyond that? And that's sort of where we developed this sort of foundational approach in addition to the quick wins, which I think most companies, every company who's received investment really needs to sort of take this parallel approach in terms of driving growth.
Yeah. And I think, if investors are aware of how critical these factors are in achieving the desired growth, it's almost something you want to start addressing even before the investment closes, right? Like, as soon as you're going to make the investment and all of the paperwork is going on and all of the closing discussions are going on, like, start addressing some of these things, set expectations on what type of reporting you'll want to see. What does good performance reporting look like? What are the things that the organization needs to be clear of or know in order to produce that reporting? What are the key growth levers in the first 12 months, 18 months, 24 months? Obviously, it's going to evolve, but where are you starting? Where are you really making your big bets? I think these are all conversations that can happen even before an official investment is made. And I also think in that way, you get to really experience the leader's strengths and weaknesses and approach to different types of problems. And so I think it's a win-win to be able to start talking about some of these things as soon as possible.
Right. No, absolutely. No, I think that's a great insight. Okay. So what did we cover today? One is, like, what is the concept of fast growth and what are some of the barriers, some of the challenges to be able to achieve that fast growth? And then looking at sort of this, like we mentioned, this parallel approach to addressing foundational issues to be able to drive growth. And then also on top of that, accomplishing some of these short-term wins, because you need to show up at these board meetings and say, okay, this is how we're growing. This is what we did to actually drive, measurable growth. And so I think there's some great insights there.